Girls, brothers and sisters, friends and neighbors and comrades, allies and enemies, one and all. Welcome to the July 18th broadcast of the ZM Global Radio Show. My name is Ben McLeish. I'll be with you for the next hour. Okay, so I've got some news, things that are going on, things that are upcoming, and various projects and ventures that are related in broad respect to what we do as a movement. Then I'm going to talk a little bit very briefly about two sticking points that we seem to have when it comes to speaking to people. One is the idea of utopia, and the other is the idea of what this movement advocates being essentially analogous or similar to communism. These are two things that I think people are having problems with. They're two things that are actually quite subtle and do require a little bit of explanation. At least from my side, I will offer you my limited perspective on these in the hope that that might help you a little bit, and that in turn you may help me in retrospect as well. And then I've got 3 or 4 rather large questions that I've received from the community that I wanted to work through, and hopefully that will take us through to the top of the hour, as Americans like to say. And I hope that you enjoy it while I'm doing it. Okay, so first off, the news. I was on Friday at the studio of a little YouTube show called London Real. London Real has in the past also paid homage, and I suppose what am I trying to say? they've had Miles Dyer on as a guest, is what I'm trying to say, a couple of months ago, and put me in contact with them, and they invited me very kindly onto their show. They have a very broad scope when it comes to looking at who they speak to. They've had George Galloway on recently. They've also had the runner-up to the Miss World contest, or Universe, I believe it was. I can't remember her name now. And a few other people, but they broadly talk about what seems to be sort of actually communism. Things like nutrition is very high on their list because they're both very much into exercise, and they like to talk about the alternatives. It's very much a little bit like the Joe Rogan show in the US, minus, of course, the huge audience that he has, simply because they've been around for way less time, and they were intrinsically famous already when they started the show, but they've been getting some good traction. We spoke for about an hour and then did, about 15, 20 minutes of questions as well after that. And I think the preview for that will be up sometime this week, maybe, and then the full show will be online too. You can find them on Facebook and YouTube, or indeed at their website, which is londonreal.tv. Do pop over and show them some love and have a look at some of the other people that they've interviewed. Miles's interview was very, very good. The interview with Ben Pratt, he talks about nutrition, was also extremely good. Very much like what we try and do. Ben is very into understanding the systemic problem behind nutrition, rather than which sort of sugary drink to buy. It's really, why is this stuff around, and why is it bad for you, and why is it sometimes that the solutions aren't actually successful? Why is there a lot of bad science in nutrition and all the rest of it? He can, of course, explain it much better than I. I'm no nutritionist, of course. So that was very nice, and they're both very good hosts. I don't think that they were completely sold on what I talk about, and I think personally, you can decide for yourself, but I think I was probably having an off day when I did that interview. I don't think I was clear enough with some of mine, but we need to see what you think, and of course we can always use these kinds of things as a sort of practice, and different ways of making it better and making ourselves better in the process. The second thing is that there is a festival called the Little Green Gathering from the 10th to the 12th of August in a small place called the Sustainability Centre near Petersfield in Hampshire. I know Petersfield very well. My family's actually from just down the road. And yes, I'll be speaking there on August 10th. In fact, twice, I've been told, in recent weeks. One is at 5 p.m. That's a sort of Q&A with me generally, I hope sitting down and just talking. And then at 8:30 p.m. that same day, for an hour, I will be speaking there with a sort of a slideshow, a slide deck, if you like, in a sort of a standard way. This is a festival organised broadly by the Green Party. It features people who come from Occupy London, people who are from, the Socialist Worker Party, those kinds of left-leaning organisations, if you like, organisations. So I very much don't know what the approach is going to be with respect to either interviewing me or with really what I'm going to say. I have to couch what we speak about, which is a global, resource-based, open source economic model, if you like, where there are no states, where there is no politics, where there are as few laws and regulations as possible, the problems which create those laws having been actually solved through technical and scientific means, and the understandings of what it actually means to live on a spherical planet with no real borders, and where rapidly the sort of positive and negative effect of our society is really just having an effect on absolutely everyone now. I don't know where to place that, but I will certainly give it a good go, and it'll be my first really political event, I suppose, if you like, so it should be fairly interesting. Okay, other news. Peter Joseph's new show, Culture in Decline, debuted in just under 2 weeks, 29th. That should be rather exciting, I think. It should be very interesting. It'll be interesting to see how it sort of chimes in with a lot of the stuff that we speak about. The first of these shows is called What Democracy? If you followed us very carefully, or indeed if you followed even the very basic alternate media, you will by now aware that the political system, especially in America, is entirely bought and paid for, and really always has been. And there's this wonderful illusion of choice it's actually fairly cliche to talk about that now. It's amazing. We still have to keep saying that. It's been extremely obvious in the bygone eras of vote fixing and installing state heads that are interested towards your particular interests as another state. There is really only one thing, and that is to vote for real ideas and not for talking puppets that are in fact funded by the same set of people every single time. I remember actually, just on that point, I'd been following a blog for about 3 years that was by no means an interesting blog, but it had covered a couple of really good stories, and it was a nice way to stay on top of things. I wouldn't, it doesn't really matter. Where this gentleman was writing from a sort of what it means to be a homosexual sort of a viewpoint. He was writing from sort of a gay rights activist. And after attacking President Obama over and over again, months on end, about his terrible decisions, or indeed the decisions that are really informed by his corporate backers, and all the stuff that we talk about, all that built-in nonsense that perpetuates and worsens some of the particular gross elements of our society, Obama came out about 2 months ago in favor of gay rights. That's some new thing, in favor of gay marriage, as if it's some sort of breakthrough. And, and he said, fair enough to him, he said, I think that, marriage can be more than just love between a man and a woman. It can be a love between a man and a man, or a woman and a woman. And this caused so many shockwaves with this gentleman, who had been rigorously covering all the problems, all of the failings, all of the shortfalls of this electoral race, that he suddenly said he's going to throw his vote behind President Obama. And when I wrote to him and said, look, I've been following your blog for years now, I find this movement from, being almost bordering on understanding the system problem to just violently swinging to one side because of this one issue, which should really be self-evident by now, and really isn't news. I find that quite baffling. And he wrote back to me and said, well, it's a shame you haven't learned anything in those 3 years, because you would know, I don't know, something ridiculous, something like, the gay rights issue swung him. And then he accused me of being a supporter of Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney, the Mormon former governor of Massachusetts, somebody whom I would probably guess, absolutely no values with when it comes to what it means to actually preside over, or indeed live in a society that functions of what might be important. This man's a multi-millionaire, might even be more rich than that. It was entirely invisible to him that there might be more than just the choice of these two sort of comical candidates, but it wasn't there. And when I wrote back and said, don't you think it might actually be a systemic issue that you get only to choose between two ridiculous people who are placed right in front of you, very, very arbitrarily, because they happen to avoid a particular opinion, or because, even worse, they speak to a specific graphic. That's the worst one. That means that you're dealing with people's preconditions to get them to vote for a certain candidate. That is the opposite of what it should be, surely. Surely you should be responding to people's needs, not their conditionings. Nevertheless, he then, of course, refused to publish that answer, and I've stopped following him. So, yes, the first episode of Culture in Decline will be interesting. It's to do with any of that. Who knows? We'll see. A gentleman from the UK has reminded me that the company ET3, which is a maglev transportation company, they develop high-speed transport that essentially uses vacuums to move as far on Earth as in space with no friction and all the rest of it. They are part of a contest that can be voted for up until the 31st of August 2012. ET3 featured very briefly in Zeitgeist Movement and have been featured in some of our work since then as well. They're not. I don't think they're to do with us. They do advocate using way less materials to create an integrated transport system and, of course, make it vastly more efficient. I think one of their numbers is something like LA, New York in 45 minutes, something amazing like that. I think it's that. But listen, you can go and vote for them. I would recommend it. Read the brief first, of course, and read the others too. But you can find that contest by Googling ET3 contest or by going to contest.techbriefs, which is techbriefs.com/transportation. Or indeed just the techbriefs.com, you'll find them. A very worthwhile cause, I think, even if it is just to raise the profile of what kind of future transportations we could be using that don't rely so heavily on fossil fuels, that don't have so much waste and queuing. You're talking to a man who spends most of his time on airplanes, and it sounds great, doesn't it? But it's so awful. It's the amount of queuing I've done in my life is quite remarkable. I think I've actually queued for longer than I've been a part of the Zeitgeist Movement or will ever be. And when you see the efficiencies of it all, like, for example, when you land and you have to wait another 40 minutes because they can't align the stupid stairs with the different shaped aeroplane that they brought in because it was made by someone else, and there's all kinds of bizarre health and safety regulations that are stopping people from doing it while other people are absent, even though they would be able to, or indeed that you'd even need people for that at all. Yes, it becomes very evident that we do need something which is way faster, way safer, way cleaner, and something that looks kind of awesome as well. Right, and the last piece of news, the Zeitgeist Media Festival, August 5th. The LA event, which I attended last year, is this year a little bit earlier. It's more than a month earlier, actually. That's at the Bardo in LA, and of course worldwide with what we call sympathetic events. There's one in New York as well. I don't know what the deal is for the UK. We might only have a few very, very small ones, simply because it's so vastly hard to get organized. But nevertheless, August the 5th. Is one. You can find the sympathetic events and indeed the detail of the main event on zeitgeistmediafestival.org. Some of the people who are going this year, I think I can't make it this year. It's too difficult with my timing plans. But I was thinking about it for a while. Some of the acts this year are fantastic. I mean, we've got James Cromwell, the man who is actually, I think he's an Oscar-winning actor, but he won his Oscar for The Babe, as far as I remember, Pig movie. But of course, he's been in Star Trek and all the rest of it. He has a particular social bent that he does. The creator of Heroes, Tim Kring, who's also on a board with Peter for, I think it's Project Peace on Earth. He has also got, I think it's called something like Counter Corruption or something. He has a certain type of social activism as well, and I think the old friends from last year are there as well. Rick Overton, I believe, is comparing a man who managed to stay at Funny for pretty much 8 hours last time. I don't know how he does that. And the band Hyrosonic are back as well, who are fantastic with the very, very brutal delivery of their songs. Very impressive. Wonderful guys too. So if you're in the area, or even if you're in America, I would suggest going there if you can, or going to the New York event, or maybe setting up your own. And if you do, make sure you register them on zeitgeistmediafestival.org. So that's enough for the news for now. Right, okay, so let me see if I can wrap my head around the following two questions, or at least two areas of questioning which often come up with the people we're trying to talk to about what this means to have a resource-based economy, what it means to have an earth-centered economy where humanity can live in a fairly waste-free environment, just like everything else does. There is no waste, really, in nature, is there, as Nick from London Real said to me. So let's start with utopia. What is utopia? Why are we not advocating a utopia? I'll do this fairly quickly, but I'm going to start this way. There are, in fact, two different words, utopia, and they're actually spelt differently as well. There's the utopia with the U, that's the one that we usually throw out, which means nowhere, not a place. And then there's utopia with an EU, which means the good place. So it actually encapsulates accidentally both meanings, even though they're actually two separate words. The perfect place, I suppose. There are various versions of this. There are economic utopias, which largely center around not having money. I think that's probably where the first reference to us comes in, because a moneyless society must be a perfect one, apparently. That's obviously not self-evident at all, is it? I mean, you can have a moneyless society, and it could be awful. It seems to be an arbitrary way of to describe perfection to me. The other version of utopia, meaning nowhere, is the idea that this is just utterly unachievable. And again, that doesn't really get any kind of detail going either. There doesn't seem to be any information in that. The problem I have with this at all is that when people hear that we suggest that we reorientate our efforts from a monetary, profit, consumption, and waste mechanism, you could say the death of society is really to be measured in its waste. The more waste we have, clearly the shorter it's going to work, because we only have a finite number of resources, and even if we had infinite resources, it would actually be even worse, because waste would just spiral out of control as we just gleefully consume more and more, safe in the knowledge that we have infinite resources and there's enough for us all forever. If it's still based on consumption, if it's still based on waste, if it's still based on cycles in that sort of linear way, from consumption to throw away to don't reuse, the way that nothing in nature does it, then if we're just simply talking about fixing that, if we're simply talking about orientating towards something that would be actually sustainable, that could be around in 100,000 years or even 10,000 years, even 100 years, that'd be good. And that's something that would actually increase in quality over time, where people's average age spans are increasing worldwide equally, and where there aren't any borders, because why would there be borders in a place that actually actively knows that by sharing its knowledge, it's going to maybe, as a return, get even better knowledge shared back at it, as one synapse in this global brain informs another synapse. If you look at that, if you think about that, how is that perfection? Have you really been this robbed of the ideas of what it means to be successful, what it means to be sustainable, what it means to live a good life, that the idea that everybody in the world couldn't even have a baseline of clean drinking water, of free, brilliant accommodation, housing that is just built to last and be updated at the same time? Is that really your idea of perfection? To me, the lack of war, the lack of massive debt economies, the need to purchase what is basic human sustenance, that's the baseline. That's where we start. That's breaking even on a societal level. So I always find it astonishing that we've been that brainwashed, that destroyed, that depressed, if you like, on a physical and emotional level, into thinking that just the absence of war would somehow be paradise. That's amazing. We're still going to have disease. We're still going to have disagreements. We're still going to have things that don't work. We're still going to have failed experiments, because that's what it means to employ the scientific method, to find out what doesn't work and then to have narrowed down as to what does, to revise. We'll be proving ourselves wrong, like all the time. A utopia, in any definition of the word, you can look up any of the versions of it, does not include the idea of a constantly upgrading society where the old is binned because that's no longer perfect. Perfection in that idealized way. So I really don't understand. People think that will be absolute heaven on earth. This is the absolute baseline we're fighting for here. We're fighting for simple survival, and we know that survival means that it has to affect everybody on the planet. They can be equally as free to update the system backwards. Again, we come back to this old metaphor of the internet. The reason why the internet is so great, at least for now, is that anybody with some programming skills, and that of course requires education, and that's something we talk about as well, can go online and can use the basic text protocol language of the internet, the HTMLs, the XMLs, and all, XHTML, all those things, Java, all the standards, and they are standards, to create whatever they damn well please. They can create for good. They can create things like mail, HTML mail, which is created by, I believe, an Israeli 15-year-old boy. I must correct myself. Maybe I know it was a young gentleman who just did it, sold it to Microsoft for I think 400 million. They can create these wonderful things that completely change how we do things. That boy, by the way, how many thousands and millions of tons of CO2 has he saved by us not sending letters anymore? Did he know he was going to do it? No, he didn't. But it is a logical retroaction, a positive retroaction of what he has accomplished. So, you can obviously do it for that, or you can use the internet to create awful things like the Stuxnet virus, or I think it's actually a worm, or viruses of any kind. The goal, of course, is that we don't just blindly use technology and the scientific method to do what we please. The whole point of being in a society that understands its place in the world and the universe, the blue dot that Carl Sagan reminded us of when he turned that Voyager spacecraft around and took that photo, that tiny, tiny photo in the darkness of where we are and who we are. The whole point of that is that to know that from the beginning, you wouldn't then go and destroy a load of stuff and make everything worse for, ergo, yourself, because you understand you're part of the whole and you're also a valuable individual component. And this individual components thing, even though it's screamed at, very individualistic societies now talk about this all the time, there really is no individuality anymore, is there? Not really. Everything is so homogenized, so controlled, so depressed, so a lost face in the crowd that we really can't be shouting that this system, or indeed any version or perversion of this system, is doing anything but amalgamate into a blind, obedient mass the people that have happened to be, as Charles Bukowski said it, born into this. So next time you're talking to someone about Utopia, maybe you want to use bits of that. I don't know. That's just my thought on it. I find it incredibly overselling of the resource-based economy to claim it's perfect, and to claim it's anywhere near perfection. It never will be. The wonderful thing about it is that we can update it, and it can just at least refocus the baseline for what is important to be common human need. And that does exist. I've read quite a lot of libertarian literature recently and a lot of Austrian economic literature. And one of the tenets of that whole movement is that it is of no man's place, it is a no man's business to tell other people what would be good for them. Really. Well, every single Austrian economist needed water while they were alive, because they mostly were water. So we can pretty much narrow it down to you do need clean drinking water, and you need it where you are, near where you are. You can't go for more than 3 days without water, although there is a record for longer than that. But unless you want to start crying blood, I think we want to maybe revise that tenet. You do need access to energy, whether it's your own through the functioning body of yours, which also requires healthcare, or whether it is through the general orientation of transport throughout society, between your family members and all the rest of it. It seems rather petulant to suggest that we don't know some of the baselines. We do, in fact, know some of them. Of course, we don't want to just dictate everything. That's absurd. The whole point of a society that is going to function correctly is that you just take care of the basic necessities and you take care of the most phenomenal education. And then you really don't have to have this ever-expanding center. There is quite a lot of the areas of an RBE that aren't dictated or aren't planned. For example, who's going to plan what kind of art we have in the future, or what kind of writing is acceptable? This is not, this is actually censored now, but there's no need to control all that nonsense, because censorship is usually a product of the state, and there isn't a state. If there's a world economy, a world society, a world family, a real world consciousness, and that starts sounding spiritualistic to you, then maybe it's just the word consciousness that you have a problem with. But we are a one world unity. We're just divided at the moment. So there we go. The next one here, and I'll halt where my understanding ends on this. Difference to communism. Why is a moneyless society that's based on everything I've just described not exactly the same as communism, whether it's state communism or what some people call pure communism and all the rest of it? Look, I only have a few talking points to this. Obviously, it can't be the same as all communistic societies of the past. I can argue whether that really was communism or not, but all those societies were highly, highly centralized. Now, a resource-based economy is not at all centralized. In fact, centralization doesn't work very well when it comes to accounting for, distributing, and managing the world's resources, be they energy, be they physical, be they the human mental technologies that we have, the faculties that we have. to do a top-down doesn't work, and that's in fact what we see in some of the prior communistic societies. God's plan, in complete opposition to anything that we talk about. God's plan was the, if I remember correctly, the 1950s to 1970s USSR plan, which really was everything was on fear. They said taxis can go 20 miles a day, or I don't know what the number really was, but it was something like that, 20, 30 miles a day. After that, they have to stop, and wherever they stop, that's not planning. That's not even central planning, actually. So the whole, any of those previous planned economies where they do centralization, where it's essentially just a high form of government, this is thoroughly in opposition to what it means to be able to manage a planet correct. Just like the engine doesn't control everything in your car, indeed, nor does just the steering wheel, and in fact, the brake fluid, has a good job to do with that as well. These are interconnecting systems that have an overall effect of moving you forward. The car, quite literally, and with the society, more metaphorically speaking. So that's the first one. There's no centralization. We don't need centralization. Centralization, in fact, is exactly what we do not need. It's also a fixed idea, communism. Not only is it informed by general positions about class and about workers and about labor, but it is actually sort of, it broadly talks about, the end of history and all this kind of stuff. And this is also not really in line with that as well. The whole idea of a resource-based economy, again, is that it's really just a train of thought, set of skills and resources and understandings. That's it. How it evolves in the future will be absolutely unrecognizable. In 50 years' time, what we're advocating in terms of physical structures is going to look completely different to what it is now. And in fact, actually, if you pay attention to people who have actually designed integrated systems, people like Buckminster Fuller, people like Jacques Fresco, what you actually see is they probably need a little bit of updating now. Because, for example, Fresco was talking about his circular cities containing a massive sort of earth in real time in the middle of the city. That's not really needed if you can access that on any screen in the city either. Now, you could have it there for other reasons, and there are probably reasons I'm not understanding. But of course, there are going to be elements to any designer's design that is updatable, and this is something that Fresco explicitly admits, and that's what's so great about it. The whole idea is that we do not have a fixed state, whereas I get the impression from the communist writings I've read and the communist speak I've heard is that it really just ends up with being sort of a steady state society in the sense of there being very little progress. And it continues actually to be very much couched in these terms of idealized classes and all the rest of it, even though by then you've got rid of them. We don't base our understanding on a dislike of class, although, of course, we don't appreciate the idea of class because we, as I've talked about many times before, we in our reading list have many books by people like James Gilligan that point out that class systems create what's called structural violence. And structural violence is essentially that shame that's heaped upon you from the class above, that shame that you heap upon yourself by feeding a class below. And, of course, the whole idea of not being able to move from one class to the other is, in fact, a huge problem. Can be seen to create a huge amount of narcissistic personality disorder behavior, greed behavior, and violence and crime and so on. That's the reason we don't want class, not because of some reason that the one class controls the labor processes. That's not even true anymore, really. And even if they did, it really doesn't say anything with respect to how you ought to be designing society so that you can actually, in a unified way, very much like dancers in concert moving to one beat, can somehow orient themselves correctly to live on the planet. This seems to be something that's utterly absent from the communistic literature. Something else that seems also quite set from it is that it doesn't seem to talk about resources, and it certainly doesn't really talk about global resources either. It doesn't even make an attempt at doing that. Marx was a social theorist. He was, a commentator actually. And hey, man, some of his stuff was, very good. Not all of it. Some of it was outright wrong. I had some wonderful conversations with Graham Wright from Man Against the State at the moment. He's very apt at pointing out the absurdities of Karl Marx. Too bad that my defense doesn't have to be of Marx for him. It doesn't matter. I have no vested interest in defending him. Defending some of his ideas, maybe, but that would be just like defending some of the stories of Roald Dahl as being very good and some of them as not being very good. I have no interest in Dahl as a person. I have more interest in the train of thought and what grips me and what seems to make sense and what turns out to be scientifically provable. So those are my 2 cents on it. I hope it helps. Maybe you can add to it. In fact, I really hope you do. I hope you do add it, and that you can perhaps give me some more pointers where I've maybe missed a point or where people have come back with good answers. This is all one big global conversation. Please, I'm no particular node of it. I'm simply relaying what I've heard and come to understand. That's it. I'm no expert on anything else. So, all right, and with that, I'm just going to check you guys are still there. Yes, I think you are. Good. If you're not, I'll talk to you later. All right, and so that I'm going to move on to the questions from the members. Let me just check how I'm doing. Yeah, it's about half an hour. Okay. So I had a very long question from Christian via Facebook. Christian, for this, I'm going to read all of it out, actually, although I think I've truncated some of it towards the end. But here it is. Christian writes, I've been thinking about how TZM, the Zeitgeist Movement, always claims that most, if not all, problems are technical. It doesn't sit well with me. I think that most or all of our problems are a lack of understanding and a lack of knowledge. And to claim the science or scientific method can solve all our problems today is a bit of a stretch, especially when most people are dependent on what perspectives you apply as well. No problem is a problem to everyone. I've been talking about this before, and I believe we cannot use the scientific method to see any problem until we know the whole cause and effect chain of said problem. And we simply cannot do that today, and maybe we never will. By applying technology as a solution without applying knowledge and understanding will most likely only cause even more problems. I actually think that most of our problems today are philosophical and that we lack spirituality, in quotation marks, brackets, connection with nature and the understanding of how it works. If we spent just half the time we do on technological research researching greed, I think we would be a lot better off. And if we actually realized that our current scientific knowledge is pretty rough and around the edges, we would be a lot more careful of applying technological solutions to the problems we barely understand. That's where I'm going to end on that. Okay, here are my points on that, Christian. Thanks for the question, and I do understand where you're coming from. The first thing you say, no problem is a problem to everyone. That's absolutely true, but you'll notice that in many of our talks, in many of our materials, we do talk about solving humanity's common problems. We don't have to go around saying that we're going to solve absolutely every problem. No, that is absolutely incorrect. And it would be gratuitously absurd of us to suggest that we could. However, there are shared problems, and those shared problems are in fact, very evident, and we think have a root cause in the methods of the system that we have today. Those methods being economical, political, and in some cases, the way that we apply our scientific knowledge as well. And that is, of course, a point that you bring up later. You say I believe we cannot use the scientific method to solve any problem until we know what the whole cause and effect chain of said problem is. That's absolutely correct as well, and that's of course also what we advocate. It is a massive systems theory understanding of the world. In fact, I'm going to read to you a couple of pages from Buckminster Fuller's Critical Path, which I highly recommend to everybody listening, to get you a sense, I hope, of not only the interconnectedness of things, but the attitude that we should have in going about this. Maybe it'll help. Let me know if it doesn't. Critical Path comprehensively traces all the important trends of history that have led to this moment of humanity's potential first-stage success and its opening of a whole new chapter of humanity's ever functioning in local support of the integrity of eternally regenerative universe. To know now what we could never have known before 1969, which he's referencing the moon landing there, that we now have an option for all humanity to, quote, make it successfully on this planet in this lifetime, is not to be optimistic. It is only a validation of hope, a hope that had no operationally foreseeable validity before 1969. Whether it is to be utopia or oblivion will be a touch-and-go relay race right up to the final moment. The race is between a better informed, hopefully inspired world versus a running scared, misinformedly brain-conditioned older world. Humanity is in final exam as to whether or not it qualifies for continuance in universe as mind with the access to design laws called by science the generalized principles governing eternally regenerative universe. Human minds have a unique cosmic function not identifiable with any other phenomenon, the capability to act as local universe information harvesters and local universe problem solvers in support of the integrity of eternally regenerative universe. At the present cosmic moment, muscle, cunning, fear, and selfishness are in powerful control of human affairs. We humans are here in universe to exercise the universe functioning of mind. Only mind can apprehend, abide by, and be led. If human mind comes into control of human affairs, the first thing it will do is exercise our option to make it. If you read the entire Critical Path book carefully, including its sometimes long but essentially detailed considerations, and pay realistically close attention to these considerations, you'll be able to throw your weight into the balancing of humanity's fate. While you could be the straw that breaks the camel's back, compressively you can also be the straw of intellect, initiative, unselfishness, comprehensive integrity, competence, and love, whose ephemerally effective tension saves us. I'll stop there. The general point he's making, and the general point that we have to make, is that the cause and effect you talk about is absolutely everything that we have. It's not just where the resources are, but how much energy it takes to use those resources, what it means to use those resources, what kind of byproducts do we have for those resources, and all the rest of it. The whole goal of this is to understand as much as we possibly can at any given moment, and of course that'll always be limited, and it'll always grow. It'll always grow. We double, I've said this before, it comes from Ray Kurzweil, we double human understanding every 13 months. It's staggering fact. We have many, many terabytes of information this year. We'll double it without even trying, really, next year, just through the endeavors of science and everything else that has been going on. At some point, it gets to the point where you can then analyze a huge amount of the information on Earth. Hewlett-Packard's been doing this with the SENSE system, which is the central nervous system for the Earth. It's not science fiction. It just needs to be applied holistically. You next say, I think that most of our problems today are philosophical, that we lack spirituality, connection with nature, and understanding of how it works. What you've just described is science, not spirituality. To me, understanding of how nature works is, in fact, all of the scientific method and all of the scientific understandings. Nature is everything that's here. It's everything that exists and happens. Even if you like miracles, and you know, miracles have got to be part of nature, don't they? There's no metaphysical element to this. But I understand what you might be hinting at, which is the sort of emotional connection with things. I now, when I'm flying in planes, or when I'm on a train somewhere, or even if I was just today actually looking out of my window, a staggering view of North Yorkshire, I look at it very differently now. I look at it as, it sounds so absurd, but I look at all of the wildlife around here as companions now, things that share the biosphere with me. I didn't look at it like that for a very long time, but it's self-evident. These are all living beings. Trees have DNA, which is something that might surprise you at first. I'm not saying that trees are exactly the same as humans. That's, of course, ridiculous. And any amount of basic, study will tell you that we're a human-made, not a tree. But we obviously are talking about everything here, and there's an obvious reason why we find the green very beautiful. We find it beautiful because the eyes and the human brain wouldn't survive if we didn't also find our environment attractive. If we found it ugly, we'd cut it all down, and that's in fact what we're doing. But we're not doing it because we find it ugly. We're doing it because money has taken over and co-opted that sense of what is valuable. But green is still relaxing to the eye because it's had to become that way over the course of a lifetime, over the course of evolutionary history, because we wouldn't survive or be able to handle survival if we did not find it relaxing. If we spent just half the time on what we do on technological research, researching greed, I think it would be a whole lot better off, you say. Greed is a non-scientific word. It actually denotes a set of behaviors that are informed by the environment and possibly by genetics as well. It's not one or the other, of course. It's mostly the environment. If I had to choose one, it would be mostly environment. There are, of course, differences. You can have people who are born in very psychopathic ways. That's due to a deliberate brain malfunction. In other words, it's a technical issue in some cases. That might seem very strange to you, perhaps, Christian, but greed is technical in most cases. And, of course, if it's promoted by the society, there's nothing really to study but to study the society itself and not individual greed mechanisms. Of course, that has come very much under scrutiny as well with our materials. We've talked very much about what it means to be good or bad as a human being, what we mean by human nature, and what we mean by those kinds of things. There are, of course, societies around the world that are thoroughly greedless. The Buid are a completely non-heroic race. I say that in the sense that they don't value heroism. They don't value an entire metaphorical abstract notion that we have very much elevated. It's almost unthinkable, isn't it? There are kibbutzim, there are South American and some African and some Middle Eastern, and indeed in Papua New Guinea, civilizations that have no greed whatsoever, that are in fact also resource-based. Of course, we're not advocating going and moving back into the forest. We think that we can take both. We think that we can have our technology and our brilliant ability at design and at problem solving and correct resource use, and we can have a society not based on fear for a change and bullshit, to say it bluntly. Apologies. So this is really what we're talking about. Really, I mean, your question is actually a reassertion of everything we talk about. So ironically, I'm in agreement with you. It's just that you seem to be objecting to the very things you then turn around and agree with. Yes, it's holistic. Yes, it won't solve everything. Yes, there is an emotional component to wanting to live on the planet. But all of these things don't contradict putting science and technology first. To utilize science and technology to realize those things that you value about the philosophical and the spiritual. The definitions of which I will have to leave to you. So, number 2. Thank you, Christian. That was great. Please, you can write to me if I didn't get it right, or if you think it was utterly inappropriate. Number 2. Okay, this one is actually from a gentleman called Warren. I've borrowed his phrase. And it's something I'm seeing a lot recently in the movement. It's something I wanted to personally address. And it goes something like this. Shouldn't the movement spend more time on physical solution projects instead of advocating a theory? Right. Okay, I understand where this comes from, because when you spend a little bit of time reading zeitnews.org, or indeed any of the websites feed into that, and when you realize that there are other projects out there like Transition Towns and Earthships and the Lifeboat Foundation and all these other things that are very much in the process of developing projects, then you do turn around and wonder maybe why it is that the Zeitgeist Movement doesn't advocate directly, or doesn't, as its main function at the moment, try and create some kind of resource bank, if you like, whether it's something like Time Bank or whether it's, I don't know, anything, political party, any of those things. We are, if you like, and I heard it expressed once by a person who wrote a question to Peter years ago, we're an educational charity. It's not our function at the moment to do that. We don't have the resources even really to operate on an educational basis the way that we do. It could be doing a lot better than we are, but I think extremely well. We keep popping up everywhere, and we keep changing minds, and changing minds based on the logical train of thought, not because we bombard some website with a bunch of stuff, but because it becomes clear to people that it's something they should care about. No one is going to be interested in any temporal solutions that we offer, whether it's, I don't know, a massive farm that operates in a resource-based way, which of course it can't, because a resource-based economy is global. It is everything. It is the fundamental interconnectedness of all societies worldwide in a self-improving and contra-improving way. No one's going to give a shit about that if they don't buy into that idea to begin with. And the reason why places like Transition and Earthships are still marginal is because most people don't care about this stuff. And it's our job to make them care. It's our job to say, listen, here are the dire consequences of everything that's happening now. Here are the root causes. Here's what we can do to get out of it, right? Employing science and technology, employing human interconnectedness, human cooperation rather than competition. And here are here's an emotional expression as to why. Then, of course, people will be interested in those projects. Those projects already exist in part, and they would grow exponentially if they had an influx tomorrow of people who are genuinely interested in spending their entire weekend instead of boozing and consuming or feeling so damn tired that all they can do is turn the TV on to go and do that. Until then, Warren and everybody out there, including my sons, because I sometimes think about this too, it's not going to change until we make people care, until we change the zeitgeist. And if you don't like that focus, then I highly recommend that you spend a lot of time helping those people, the good people out at Transitions or starting your own independent projects. We can't just ignore the mass education of people in order to get them to care about this stuff. And so long as most people in the world remain absolutely oblivious to this, the more pointless it will be to just throw every energy to a very expensive, very difficult to manage, lackluster, localized project system. Those in part already exist and would be very beneficial if anybody in our movement can go and help them out, because there's never enough of them. Some of them actually have. Some of them have already gone from being coordinators of TZM to going and working for transition. That's not a problem. Have they left the movement? No. The movement will exist as long as the train of thought exists, as long as the sort of the push, the inertia, if you like, towards a refocusing of society is needed. No one leaves anything. Do you think tomorrow, if everything dissolved, if we just shut down Blog Talk Radio, we stop all our lectures, and I get my social life back, do you think that anything fixes itself? Do you think any of the problems go away? No, they don't, and nor does the lack of education. And so this is really my only point on this. This continual harping about how we should be doing something is completely putting the cart before the horse. And in fact, it's putting the cart before several rows of horses, because actually there are many other movements out there that fulfill exactly what your needs are and what you think the focus should be for now. But we will not go away. Normal, similar movements that are expressing understandings, a little bit like Positive Money do about money specifically. They raise awareness. They're not setting up a bank, because it's more effective to spread education so that you can get the kind of mass awareness that you need for anything to be done. That mass awareness, of course, being ultimately the understanding that we're all connected. I hope that helps. I continuously see this talk, and I see wasted man hours typing this stuff out on forums and Facebook. The Zeitgeist Movement is an educational entity with some live events, different kinds of festivals. Of course, we always reorientate the ways that we do it. We've got people who go into schools. We have people who organize stuff down the pub. It's not fixed. It's not a doctrine either. It's a general element of scientific persuasion, if you like, or the persuasion to be interested in science and understanding the value of science. Yeah? So I hope that helps. How much time do I have left? 11 minutes. All right, I think I can do the last one. Okay, I just got this through today on my Tumblr account. So it came through from Anonymous. I don't know who Anonymous is. I don't think it's the people who do all that awesome work taking down the FBI. And I think I answered this last time, but I'm going to do it again. This is the questioner. He asks, or she asks, I think it's fair to say that we, brackets as a race, have not been able to categorically establish a correct, right, convenient, or universally applicable approach to sexual relationships. That is to say, we do not know whether Christian, Islamic, or any other denominational approach has got it right about monogamy or even polygamy, perhaps seen in tribal or Mormon communities. If the Venus Project, and as such, the Zeitgeist Movement, don't know where that connection is informed by our previous working together, would advocate an eradication of laws, where would marital legislation and childcare come into this? It's a familiar question, isn't it? I personally don't understand. Sometimes I've talked in sort of a tangential way about sexual relations today. I don't understand why we need legislation about any of this shit, right? I mean, if you're talking about coercive relationships, if you're talking about rape, if you're talking about coerced, non-voluntary, non-reciprocal relationships, obviously that's not a law or an understanding even about sexual relationships at all. It's a matter of your disposition towards someone else, and that being a violent one or a non-violent one. I can't see how a resource-based economic system, a global village, would need to have any kind of laws about sexual relationships. I can't think of a scientific reason why you should ban gay marriage. There isn't one, right? Homosexuality appears in nature as well. We have gay dolphins, gay hedgehogs, gay sheep, gay rats. It appears everywhere, right? We even have asexual animals that mate with each other. What's that? Is that gay or not gay? You tell me. Why would there be a law about this to begin with? To be honest with you, most of those laws come from the church. They come from prior assumptions or from age-old, Bronze Age, Palestine-based religions where it was actually quite important that we reproduce, and people didn't understand what homosexuality was. They thought it was some kind of horrible perversion of nature, because all they knew from nature was that they had a particular mechanism to survive. They had small tribes, they had a fragile population, all the rest of it. I don't think, well, I wouldn't know this, but I think that the percentage of gay people to straight people is pretty much stable. I don't know, maybe that's not true, but it doesn't really matter. None of this would really have a purview in a system of world access. What the hell does anybody have to say about any of that stuff? The only thing I can think of with relation to sexual relations at all, and it's not even monogamy or polygamy, which do exist around the world in different ways and to varying degrees of success, is overpopulation at all. And that people always say, oh, there's too many people. No, we have, in fact, not enough people helping us out or being enabled to help us out. And we certainly don't have enough of the technology that's abundantly available to look after the people we do now. We could look after more. I find it amazing that we don't see it this way around. I suppose it's because it's only ever expressed in the negative. It's only ever expressed like Thomas Malthus first expressed it, that eventually the resources will run out and the human population will just have to crash. No, sorry, don't accept that. Human beings are already here. There are 7 billion of us already here, and it is our absolute remit to do everything we can to make them survive, to allow them the best possible life, because they were born into this. Again, I call back Bukowski from the opening piece, and they're the ones we owe everything to. They're the ones we didn't act quickly enough in time with, and they're the ones we owe it ultimately, and that's it. Right, that is everything from me for this week. I hope that was useful for you. Thank you very much for listening, and I will speak to you all very soon.